J.J. Hurtak talks about the Orion Council of Light, and I've experienced those beings, and I was initiated by one, and it was phenomenal on what happened. But, everything was returned to me, all my memories, past life memories, off-world, this world, everything. And, it turned me upside down for about 2 weeks after that experience. I had to kind of recalibrate and get grounded. But they're there, and I think we all have to just, like Jesus said, by their fruits you'll know them, and I think more by their frequency you'll know them, or by their vibration you'll know them, and their deeds. Are they empowering you as an individual to make your own personal God connection? Are they speaking of love and joy and bliss and harmony? Or are they creating a lot of fear and separation and againstness, like these low-level programs going on?
Right, and that does bring us back to this, because, here I am when I'm just as a person doing this work in the Capitol and writing the book, and just feeling like all of a sudden I feel like my consciousness is plugged into this greater reality, e pluribus unum. It's like, well, wait a minute, this doesn't reconcile with what I'm hearing about disclosure. Nobody's talking about this kind of thing. Everybody's talking about, more kind of the fear stuff, and it just doesn't even reconcile. And I wonder, how come there's such a big gap? And I think that's about when your letter went out, kind of addressing this, is that here's the gap and here's the problem. And I could really relate to it, because there's really nothing beautiful, or even in a way even appealing about disclosure as it's presented for the most part to me.
Well, what I've seen about disclosure and being involved in it is that, I don't want to put down that program, and they are doing a benefit in getting out the fact that UFOs are here, they've always been here, and also, too, is bringing out a lot of the real credible witnesses, top government officials and everything else. But it goes back to that old program: is the mind in which you seek is the mind in which you connect. And if you have a military mindset of againstness and the enemy and all this other stuff, you're not really going to hook up with these higher beings, and it just doesn't happen. But I've had people in the military after they've done a shift in consciousness, and they released the past and had a major awakening, and then they did connect with these higher beings. But they had to change their entire mindset for this to happen, and I just don't see that in that program, unfortunately. It's the majority of the program, and and I've had some of those guys ask me, well, how come you don't have me come and speak at the conference? And I said, well, it's a really good question. How come you haven't had me come and speak? And they go, that was a good question, and that was the end of it. I just said, I said, well, I don't want to promote, that these guys are all a threat. We fear change in the unknown, and that is the biggest threat, and we have to get over that, because these beings do represent change in the unknown, and we're here to make the unknown known. That's why we incarnated, is to experience, the unknown and grow and evolve. So it's just a matter of where the direction that's going in. I asked him, I said, well, what about all these extremely advanced beings that are 5th, 6th, 7th dimensional beings, 9th dimensional beings, that have transcended all of this separation, greed, war, lack. They've transcended disease. They have their abundant energy, transportation, all their energy needs are met fearlessly. And I said, what about all of these beings? Why don't they get a venue or some space in these conventions? And you just don't hear about it. They're either trying to prove that they're real, or they keep your head cranked back into the past, or they're with Roswell and everything else, or you're just going, it's happening now, folks, and the majority of it is benevolent. And when are we going to look into our ancient roots and realize that these people have been guiding us all along, which I commend you for the work that you're doing, is showing that they have been a part of kind of keeping us on track and keeping us evolving, in a positive manner, so we don't devolve and totally destroy ourselves.
Yeah, and thank you for that, because, that is definitely something that just came out loud and clear in this search, especially again concerning the Capitol. It's like, well, wait a minute. I mean, this is totally benevolent, this group and this teaching here, and how come we're not being encouraged to achieve our rainbow body as if there is such a thing, a prerequisite towards becoming affiliated with these people? And because that is ultimately, to me, the path that puts you on the path of enlightenment and benevolence. And when you're focused on that, you're completely away from the whole military paradigm. And that's why I just found it really difficult to reconcile what I'm seeing here, because it just seemed like, okay, the U.S. military is completely irrelevant to any of this. Why are we always looking to have the military prove that this is actually so? Because they are absolutely nothing compared to what we're describing here.
Mm-hmm. And, they can't wrap their heads around it. They can wrap their heads around the low-level stuff, because it matches their frequency and their consciousness, but they can't even wrap their heads around the fact that these beings are interdimensional and are ultradimensional, and that their technology is a spiritual technology, and it's not used, to harm anyone or anything.
Right.
And they're not aggressive, they're not a threat, and our biggest threat is ourselves and our own actions and consciousness.
And to me, it's kind of a wink-wink kind of a joke that this is inside the dome of the United States Capitol, this message. And the dome of the Capitol is a model for a portal. I mean, Washington, as he's portrayed on the rainbow, surrounded by these 13 star beings, is also encircled by 72 stars, which you look up at that and say, well, wait a minute, that's a circle of stars, that's a gate of stars. Isn't that a stargate that he's in? And isn't 72 one of the most important numbers in the precession of the equinoxes code? And isn't this telling us that maybe there's some big galactic working that's in place here? And of all places, the dome of the U.S. Capitol encodes this teaching. I mean, this has got to be significant, and we need to pay attention to it.
It's almost like this giant clock is like ticking away, and then it reaches a certain point, and then it's going to go into overdrive and fast spin, and anybody who can't hang on is just going to be flung out, flung off the planet or something. I don't know, but it's quite interesting. To me, in the interest of national security, we should be aligning with the benevolent ones, because they have full use of creational energies and demonstrated technologies far beyond anything we can imagine. And in the interest of national security, we should be working with them to help, in disease, to help knock out all these horrendous biologicals that are flying around that are created in laboratories, and bring in the technology to heal this stuff, to turn this planet around, to clean up, the air and the water and everything else. It makes no sense whatsoever, no common sense whatsoever, other than the fact that our leadership is just totally blind and ignorant and illogical, and are just focused on their lust for power and greed at any expense. They have lost all soul connection,
Yeah, I agree.
Or they're connected to something else. That's the only thing that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I see that too, because in my own personal experience doing the research in the Capitol, I mean, the spiritual energy in that place is palpable. You feel it. And you can easily see how a person, an elected person, for example, coming into such a place who has no spiritual awareness whatsoever, is completely living in the lower three chakras, in other words, would just be intoxicated and overwhelmed by the energy of the place.
Yeah, it's probably why Bush is in rehab right now.
Yeah, right. You see how that can happen.
Yeah. Couldn't handle the energy, and everything got amplified, and all of his stuff came up to the,
That's what happens.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it literally is a power spot in that way that activates whatever energy is there, and if it happens to be you're focused on the lower, that's what's going to manifest. I mean, it literally is a temple. I mean, Thomas Jefferson, who was one of the co-creators of the temple, called it a temple of sovereignty. It was called the temple of celestial liberty when it was built. I mean, this is the mindset of the people that were creating this temple, and we have completely forgotten that. But the message is there that this literally is a temple of ascension. There's no doubt about that. And but even beyond that, it encodes this concept that beyond just earthly ascension, that what we're talking about is linking up with a group of beings who are so perhaps far beyond the average American's imagination, but yet if they learn about these beings, there's tremendous inspiration there, and people begin to ask, well, why not us? And the answer is, yeah, why not us? We can be part of that.
Oh, I agree 100%. Now, is there anything about 2012 written into, I know that 1776 was a critical number, and I remember there's a few people I've heard talk about that there's actually some kind of numbers or numerology tied into 2012. Are you familiar with that?
Well, there is. 1776, of course, is a very important number. That's one of the last countdown dates on the Mayan calendar, and it's actually encoded on the Great Seal of the United States. So that is an important part of it. But even more than that, even more directly perhaps, is the same artist who painted the apotheosis of George Washington. His name was Constantino Brumidi. Also painted the frieze inside the dome of the U.S. Capitol. It literally wraps around the interior rim, and he actually has the Aztec sunstone painted in there as well. He shows Montezuma escorting Cortez into a solar temple and shows him the Aztec sunstone, which is, of course, the basis for the Mayan long count calendar. So there's lots of 2012 connections to be made there. I mean, you've got 1776 is the beginning of the last 13 Baktuns leading to 2012. Then you've actually got the Aztec sunstone in there, so it seems to be pointing to 2012 as an extremely important date in the capital symbolism.
Yeah, maybe we're all going to get the rainbow body. The whole planet maybe attains its rainbow body, and we got to hang on for the ride.
I mean, James, just think about it. I mean, millions of Americans see the dome of the U.S. Capitol on the news every night. It doesn't matter if you watch Fox or CNN or whatever. There it is. And hopefully the people that see that recognize that that's the dome of the U.S. Capitol, although it would be scary if Jay Leno did one of his jaywalking episodes in D.C. and asked people what that building was pointing to the Capitol. But the point is that most people don't have any awareness whatsoever about what is inside that dome. It's not part of our education or our upbringing, or for whatever reason it's just not on our radar. But just imagine, you start talking with kids about George Washington and throw out the cherry tree and just say, oh, wait a minute, in the dome of the U.S. Capitol, Washington is portrayed as having achieved the rainbow body. Well, what's that? And imagine if you start bringing kids up with some understanding of the potential for transformation that's latent within our bodies, and how that could then be translated into the social implications of that are absolutely profound to me. And that's what we're talking about here. Is that will be part of the shift, where it will just literally be almost like commonplace, really, that people will have an understanding that the rainbow body is achievable, and there will be people that are on that path, and people will be recognizing the importance of that and supporting that, and our culture will acknowledge that. Whereas right now, we just have total blindness concerning these kinds of concepts. Most people have no idea if there's, 1 billion Christians, and how many of those people know what it means, the reason why Jesus is portrayed sitting on a rainbow when he's portrayed in his resurrection scenes, and its linkage to other traditions, and what it means potentially in a cosmic sense.
I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of Christians, you might say, and I ask them, they start saying, you've got to live your life according to the Bible and everything else. And I start quoting everything that's in the Bible, and they haven't even read it.
Yeah.
You know, and I said, well, why is God totally opposite